want to ask you a question. How many times have you heard preaching on verse number 5 of James, the first chapter, where it says, if any man lacks wisdom, but they never even talked about the first 4 verses? You see, I believe what James is talking about, he's talking about people, or he's talking to people that are going through rough times. Let me ask you, have you ever had this thought, what in the world is going on now? I know I've had that thought. And then sometimes it's, what did I do to deserve this? But you know what? It's just the trying of your faith. And that trying of your faith is going to produce endurance. It's going to produce a strong faith. But then James is writing, and I'm sure that there are people all around him that are saying, what do we do? Do we run? Do we leave Jerusalem? Do we go like so many over to Ephesus, or go to Antioch, or leave and go someplace else? Or do we stand here and stay? What do we do? What do we do? You see, one of the things that happens when you go through trials is you begin to ask yourself, what do I do? How do I get out of this place? And not only that, but God, what I need wisdom. And so James is writing here, and he's saying in verse number 5, but if any man lacks wisdom. Now, I would take the word if out of there. Any man lacks, or maybe I should say every man lacks wisdom. But James writes, and he says, but if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. Let him ask of God. What's James doing? James didn't say, you know what, if any man lacks wisdom, let him run to the Hebrew elders. Let them ask the Hebrew elders, what am I supposed to do? He didn't say, go to all the different philosophers and ask, what am I supposed to do? Go to the men of wisdom and the women of wisdom and ask. It's not what James said. He says, but. In other words, if you're going through trials and you're wondering what in the world's going on, ask God. Ask God for wisdom. Ask God, what do I need to do next? Ask God. But James didn't just end that verse there. He says, but if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. And then he says, for, or who in the New American Standard, who gives to all generously. What does God do? He gives it to you. He gives it to you. If you're in trial, if you're going through a testing of your faith, and you're saying, what's going on? What do I do next? Maybe you're at a point where you're beginning to doubt yourself and doubt what you've been doing. What do? You turn to God and you say, God, I need your wisdom. How many of you know God's wisdom is far beyond our human understanding? You know what? You don't know exactly what you're going to do tomorrow. You might pull out your schedule. I would say day timer, but nowadays all the schedules are on your telephone. And you might say, oh, I'm going to be here at 9 o'clock and I'm going to be there at 10 and I'm going to, you know what? You don't know that for sure. But God does. He knows exactly what is going on in your life right now, even though you don't know it. So James says, you know what, if you're lacking wisdom, he's saying go to God. Because God gives wisdom to all. Let's go ahead and read that again. He says, he gives to all, and then he says, generously. God doesn't say, okay, just a little dab here, just a little bit there, just a little bit there. No, he gives wisdom to all of us generously. It's an abundance of wisdom. God wants to share with you his wisdom. And you know what? That sharing of wisdom will help you to maneuver through times of trials. I can look back on my life, many instances where I'm going through a trial of my faith, and I go to God, and God gives me wisdom. One time, I'll never forget this. One time, God just said, just sit low in the boat. In other words, Leon, don't do anything stupid right now. Just sit low in the boat and ride it out. Now, that was wisdom from God. So if you're going through trials and you're wondering what you need to do, ask God, because he gives it to you generously. And now we're not quite finished yet, because the end of verse number 5 says, without reproach. Now, what does it mean when he says without reproach? It actually means that God isn't prejudiced, that God doesn't favor one person over the other. God doesn't favor one believer over another believer. God doesn't give you wisdom and to say, well, you know what? I'm not going to give it to you because you just don't qualify. I'm just going to give it to this person over here. No. God gives it without prejudice, without reproach. God wants to give you wisdom. He doesn't care who you are. He doesn't care if you're what you're doing. As long as you're his child, he wants to give you the wisdom that you need and that I need to get through this time of trial. Where he gives generously, he gives without reproach, and in the very end, it will be given to him. It will be. God will give you the wisdom you need, the wisdom that we need to go through trials. And then our faith is going to get stronger and stronger. It's going to become more and more enduring. Wow, what a mighty God we serve. I hope you join us again next week as we study through the book of James. Thank you for watching.